Oba Ewuare the Great was not born into his title. He seized it through exile, bloodshed, and brilliance. His story begins not as a king, but as a prince named Ogun, one of the sons of Oba Ewuare of the Benin Kingdom in the 15th century. But the royal court was treacherous. When his younger brother usurped the throne and declared himself Oba, Ogun was forced into exile, fleeing deep into the forests. There, alone and disgraced, he wandered for years. But this exile was not the end. It was the beginning of a transformation. In the forest, Ogun is said to have encountered mystical forces. He trained with spiritual masters, acquired knowledge of powerful charms, and learned the secrets of medicine, warfare, and the occult. He forged alliances with powerful priests and hunters, gathering not just weapons, but wisdom. When he emerged from the wilderness, he was no longer just a prince, he was a man reborn. He had become a warrior, a mystic, and a strategist who would soon carve his name into the history of West Africa. He returned to Benin not with diplomacy, but with vengeance and vision. The civil war that followed was brutal. Towns were scorched, allies betrayed, and blood spilled across the kingdom. Ogun was relentless. He fought not only to reclaim his birthright, but to redefine what it meant to rule. When he finally seized the throne around 1440, he took a new name, Ewuare, meaning the trouble has ceased. But trouble had only just begun for his enemies, for the corrupt elites, and for anyone who stood in the way of his vision for Benin. Ewuare's first acts as king were swift and transformational. He restructured the political hierarchy, reducing the influence of rival chiefs and centralizing authority in the hands of the Oba. He declared himself not just a king, but a divine ruler ordained by the spirits, beyond question or challenge. To reinforce this, he revived and expanded spiritual traditions, elevating the role of priests and oracles who answered directly to the Oba alone. His reign marked the merging of the political and the metaphysical. He enacted laws that aligned with ancestral beliefs and expanded the authority of royal diviners, who interpreted omens and guided state decisions. But Ewuare was more than a conqueror and a mystic, he was a builder. Benin City under his reign was transformed into one of the most sophisticated urban centers in the world. He ordered the construction of massive earthworks, walls, and moats that stretched for thousands of miles when measured in total length. These defenses protected not just the royal palace, but the growing capital and surrounding villages. British explorers centuries later would marvel at the scale of the engineering, calling the walls of Benin among the greatest earthworks ever created. Within the city, Ewuare redesigned the urban grid. Broad boulevards were laid out in mathematical symmetry, lined with homes, workshops, and shrines. He expanded the royal palace into a sprawling architectural marvel filled with bronze plaques, ivory carvings, and ceremonial altars. It was during his reign that the famed Benin Bronzes began to flourish, detailed castings that depicted court life, spiritual rituals, and military exploits. These were not mere decorations, they were records of power, etched in metal, testaments to the strength of the Oba. Each piece was commissioned with purpose, reinforcing the Oba's narrative and ensuring his role was recorded in immortal art. Ewuare also introduced strict court etiquette and rituals that elevated the monarchy to near-divine status. He forbade ordinary citizens from seeing his face. When he traveled through the city, people had to look away or face punishment. His presence was said to radiate both awe and fear. He controlled not only the government and military, but also the spiritual rhythms of the kingdom. Annual festivals, royal processions, and ancestral worship were woven tightly into the political order. He expanded the role of the royal guilds, specialized artisan families who worked exclusively for the palace, crafting weapons, jewelry, regalia, and ritual items. These guilds became both economic engines and cultural custodians, producing some of the most exquisite art ever seen in West Africa. Their skills were passed down generation to generation. Their loyalty sworn to the Oba, the carvers, bronze casters, blacksmiths, and leather workers became elite institutions, integrated into the very structure of the empire. Ewuare's influence reached beyond Benin's borders. He launched military campaigns that expanded the kingdom's territory deep into neighboring lands, subjugating rival chieftains and establishing tributary states. His reputation spread across the region. Some saw him as a god king, others feared him as a tyrant. Foreign merchants arriving from Europe and North Africa heard tales of a ruler whose power was absolute and whose city gleamed with sophistication. While much of Europe was emerging from the medieval age, Benin under Ewuare boasted street lighting, urban planning, and governance rooted in complex administrative systems. It wasn't just a kingdom, it was a civilization. But his rule was not without darkness. Legends say that Ewuare after the death of his beloved sons, became increasingly authoritarian and cruel. In his grief, he allegedly ordered that no more children be born in the city for a period of time. He imposed harsh laws, rooted out dissent, and used spiritual intimidation to silence rivals. His grip on power was absolute, and while he elevated the kingdom's glory, he also left behind an aura of fear. Yet even this fear was part of his legacy, proof of the reach of his power, the extent of his influence. He didn't merely rule Benin. He reshaped it from a fragmented kingdom into a centralized state with a divine monarch at its helm. When Oba Ewuare died, the kingdom he left behind was unrecognizable from the one he had inherited. It was stronger, more organized, more culturally vibrant, and ready to enter a golden age that would last for centuries. His reforms outlived him. The political and spiritual systems he created became templates for generations of Obas who followed. The walls he built, the bronzes commissioned under his name, the palace rituals he initiated, these became the DNA of Benin's identity. Even in the 19th century, when the British invaded and looted Benin City, they marveled at the sophistication of the civilization they encountered. Much of what they saw, the art, the structure, the customs, traced back to Oba Ewuare the Great. Today, his legacy is being reclaimed. The Benin Bronzes, long scattered across European museums, are being returned. His name is spoken with reverence not just in Nigeria, but by historians across the world who now recognize his reign as one of the most significant. In pre-colonial African history, Oba Ewuare was not just a ruler. He was a visionary who transformed a city into an empire, a prince into a legend, and a kingdom into a symbol of African excellence and sovereignty. His story is a reminder that greatness is forged not in ease, but in exile, struggle, and the refusal to be forgotten. He made the invisible visible, carved permanence out of impermanence, and left behind a kingdom that would speak his name for centuries. He did not inherit greatness, he constructed it.